Is everyone... Hey, Lynn? All right, we will come back from recess now and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Schwanke, could you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the agenda for February 28th, the regular meeting, work session?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, please call the roll.
Mr. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis?
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
And Mr. Melody?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. All right, now we have a couple of presentations. The Auditor of State with Distinction Award. Can I please have Ms. Hubner from the Central Region Liaison for the Auditor of State come to the podium. Thank you.
There we go. Hi there. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Tori Hubner, and I am the Central Regional Liaison for Auditor of State Keith Faber. So I am here to present you with the Auditor of State Award with Distinction. So for those of you who may not have been on the board when I've been here in years previous, I'll give you a little background. Our office audits nearly 6,000 entities throughout the state, and only about 3 to 5% of those entities are even eligible for this award, so this really puts you in an elite group of school districts. The Auditor of State Award with Distinction is presented to local governments and school districts upon the completion of a financial audit that meets the criteria of a clean audit report. This criteria includes filing timely financial reports and an annual comprehensive financial report. Additionally, it means that the audit did not include any ethical referrals, findings for recovery, material weaknesses, or significant deficiencies. Our office also started a program in 2019 called the STARS rating system. This rating system is to monitor transparency in government, and I'm happy to say that the Dublin City School District has received 3 out of 4 stars, which is an outstanding rating. You have to comply with Sunshine Law just to qualify, and then for each of your best practices, you can receive up to 4 stars. So this is a really excellent rating for school districts, and so you should all be proud of that. These accolades represent the hard work of the school employees, board members, superintendent, and most importantly, your treasurer, Brian Kern, and his staff. Thank you to Brian and your staff for outstanding leadership and commitment to fiscal integrity. On behalf of Auditor of State Keith Faber, I want to present you with the award.
As we say, we appreciate this always. We appreciate the Auditor of State coming out and giving this award. As I've mentioned many, many times, as we're primarily locally funded, this is just another way to prove our accountability to our taxpayers out there and how we spend our money. I'd like to thank my staff. They did a great job, especially Tyson Hodges, our assistant treasurer, and Chris McDowell, Lynn Green, our accounting and payroll coordinators, as doing a great job. But also, it is everyone throughout the district, as we have many points of whether it be expenditure or cash collection points throughout the district. It takes all hands from everywhere, every department, as we go through the process. So we appreciate everyone's help following our internal control structure, and I know I'm getting technical with stuff here, but and going through our policies and procedures. So there again, we thank everybody. Thank you.
All right, congratulations again, Brian, and please make sure you thank and recognize your staff as well for the excellent job well done on behalf of the board. Okay, now we have the Tolles Technical Center report update. I know Mr. Ireland is not here tonight, but
He is not here tonight. In addition to what's in that report, would like to share that Tolles is applying for a grant to significantly increase their firefighting training schools capacity. So we will be providing a letter of support to that grant that they're asking for from the state of Ohio that would allow them to increase in what is a very significant need in central Ohio and across the state by allowing that firefighting program to increase. So we'll be lending a letter of support to that, and we look forward to the hopeful expansion of that program over at Tulsa.
Thank you. And Tom's report is attached, so if you have questions, we can feel free to follow up with Tom directly.
Could I just make one question, or I guess, or comment to the board? In Tom's comments, he had mentioned either taking a tour or holding a BOE meeting there. I would just like to say that I would be in favor of that. I think it's a really good idea.
Okay, will do. We'll try to, at least, Mrs. Rigby, we can make sure that we get a tour.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, especially with new board members. We've done that in the past. It's been several years at this point, but it's always good. All right, public participation for actions on the agenda. There is no one signed up, so I'll turn it over to Dr. Marshausen for superintendent comments.
First of all, I would like to thank the board for their time in coming at 6 today for our public participation for items that are not on the agenda. We'll take a little bit of time to review the process that we went through, and my goal would be to, at our March board meeting, have a conversation with the board on how we would like to move forward with the public participation for items that are not on the agenda. We only have one meeting in March, and we've kind of split the difference. So when we do the agenda review, we'll probably just have public participation for things on the agenda in March, and we'll make a decision as we meet as a board for the next meeting how we'd like to go forward. A couple thank yous before I get into my report. I'd like to thank Megan O'Callahan and the Economic Development team for the City of Dublin, who spent almost 2 hours with me today reviewing the city's economic development plans. As I get to know the City of Dublin and look at a potential strategic plan for us, the work that they've done, the thoroughness that have gone into the city's plan is critical, and they were just exceptional today. I was so impressed. So thanks to Megan and her team. I'd also like to thank Christy Venny. Christy moderated a workforce development panel at Columbus State last Thursday, which included businesses in K-12 and higher ed from across Central Ohio. I had the opportunity to sit on that panel with business leaders and Dr. Dave Harrison, the president of Columbus State. And you're so proud when you're the superintendent and one of your own is the one who's moderating. So it was a great event. Lots of interest from the community on workforce pathways. What are those school-to-work pathways that are available to our students? And Christy's work definitely has us on the right track. I'd also like to thank Chuck Collier. He's here today. I charged Chuck to pull together our first meeting of the Joint Safety Task Force. One of the things that I asked him to do is get the fire officials and the police officials from the multiple jurisdictions that serve the Dublin City School District. We met last week on Friday morning. The sheriffs were here, the Dublin Police, Washington Township Fire, and to see those organizations work together. And it was a great opportunity for collaboration. One of the things as we come back post-COVID that we need to do is renew that commitment to our safety planning, to our drills, to our training of our staff. So much of what we have done over the past several years has been COVID related, that having an opportunity to get back to some of those essential trainings that in this situation that the unimaginable happens, that we've prepared, that we've trained, and that we're ready. So thanks to Chuck and that team, and just want to let the board know and our community know that that team will meet quarterly, and they're going to help us make sure that we're doing everything that we can do to be prepared. And I'd also like to thank Weslin Davis, who is one of our Jerome Township trustees. We're having lunch later this week. And as we look at our partners, there's always been that natural partnership with the city of Dublin. But as we expand into Union County and into Jerome Township, our partners change. And where our population grows, that communication with our growing neighbors and growing community members in Jerome Township is critical. So excited to have that conversation as we prepare and as we continue to look at the growth that we're having in the northwest quadrant of our district. Tonight I'd like to share with you my goals for our team for the second quarter of 2022. And as we look at how we set goals, and I'm being a little generous, I'm throwing March into the second quarter because I don't want to wait till April. So as we look at that second quarter of 2022, for a district that has had academic goals but hasn't had that long-term plan and doesn't have those measurable goals on a regular basis, I think adoption of goals allows us to stay focused. It allows us to look at the work that we're doing. And I will hold myself accountable for these goals, and I hope you hold me accountable for them too. And I'm open to your suggestions and thoughts as we go through this. I think, first of all, we have to identify productive academic goals. And when I say productive, I mean things that, as a district, both short-term and long-term, serve as our North Star in the work that we do. We are going to conduct an academic audit that will look at our current programs and resources, and that will identify gaps, if there are any, by subgroups. When we look at academics, there's key metrics that we must look at for what are the student results that we hang our hat on. I would argue in many cases that the state assessments are not valid and predictable measures of student performance, partially because the General Assembly changes the cut scores every year, partially because it's a one-day test that we give in the spring and we don't get the results until the end of the year, and those kids have already left those teachers. There are all kinds of problems with the state assessments. But part of that, when we look at student results, is number two, what are the measures that we want to look at? I've talked to Mrs. O'Connor, and we're going to ask our teachers, what do you use for your measures to know that you're good? I don't think that's been done before in a lot of school districts. A lot of the times the academic goals are set by the superintendent and the academic team, and teachers and buildings are told, here are our goals when it comes to academic measures. I want to hear from our teachers, and then I want to bring them to you. And I think that we need to review academic progress as a district at least twice per year, and to provide updates to you, and this will be Dr. Bailey and her team providing the updates on where we are on our goals, what are we hitting, what aren't we hitting, and what are we going to do to improve. And then finally, I think we need to revise our district technology plan. We're in the process right now of issuing a request for proposals to look at our learning management system and our student information system. And as we look at those two critical components, how do those go and merge with our Chromebook program? As a district, we kind of handed out Chromebooks like chiclets as we went into remote learning, and to make sure that every kid had the opportunity to learn from home when COVID struck. We have now become a one-to-one district with Chromebooks across the board. It wasn't something that was planned for, and it's no one's fault. We didn't know COVID was going to come, and we had devices in our schools. But what does one-to-one look like in Dublin? As an educational professional, I don't want a third grader sitting in front of a Chromebook all day. It's a tool that's in the classroom that allows them to learn. How do we work with our teachers? What do our teachers want when they look at these devices? We're in the process right now of looking at the smart boards or not smart boards that are in all of our elementary schools. What are the displays that we use? And how do we interact with students using technology? So in terms of academics, I think we need to get an audit to look at what we're doing. We have some programs that I would take a guess at right now, an educated guess, that we have some programs that we pay a lot of money for that we don't get a big ROI. And it's just the way we've always done it. We need to identify those programs. So we need to look at academic return on investment. We need to dive into our student data to see how our students are performing against the trusted measures that we believe, and we need to look at what is the role of technology in the academic process. My commitment to you as a board is that we will have progress on all three of these by the end of June. So by the end of June, you will see from us results in these three areas. Mr. Valentine sat with us back in September as we looked at building a culture handbook. Working with Tim Kite. Tim Kite came to a board meeting. Tim Kite or Derek from their firm will be with us on April 11th as a board to review the work that we've done on our culture handbook. The board will get a draft of that culture handbook in the coming days. And our goal will be to have Focus 3 share that culture handbook with the board in public at the April 11th board meeting, followed by a public rollout of that culture handbook in May. We've also been working on our R-Factor training. For those of you who are familiar with E plus R equals O, it's a training system that allows us to control our behavior, act with purpose. The term used to be above the line, but we want to be disciplined. We're training key administrative personnel by the end of June, and we want a timeline to train our staff into 2022-23. And this will come up twice. We need a mission and a vision as a district. What is the mission of the Dublin City School District, and what is our vision? I'll bring you some options, and I hope to hammer those out with you in April and have them board approved in May, because I think that's all part of our culture work. Again, several things here that have deliverables before the end of June. And finally, we need some clarity on our academic support initiatives. Some of this came up today. What is the difference between student wellness and SEL? Is there a difference between student wellness and SEL? We have a great blessing in this community with so many parent groups that are involved and so many parents who want to partner with us on this work. PERC is doing a book study and having an author come, book title Born to be Wild. And this is a parent organization that is helping and part of our vibrant community. That co-programming work, the work that Tyler Wolf is doing around student well-being and student wellness. I think we have to clarify what is our work and purpose in the Dublin City Schools, and where is that cross-section between student wellness and SEL, and what are we doing, and how do we clearly communicate that with moms and dads? I think our diversity and equity parent group is critical in the work that we're doing. As we talked about a little bit earlier today, I have 4 meetings scheduled before the board retreat. The goal would be for that group to have findings for the Board of Education for consideration as we begin the strategic planning process. That's not the end, it's the beginning. And then it's up to you as a board. Where do you want this to go moving forward? And then finally, that board retreat at the end of May. I think it's on everybody's calendar, a full day in May. When we come to that meeting, the goal is to put together a timeline for what does a strategic plan process look like. I am meeting tomorrow with Jamie from Planning Next to look at how they can help us in this process. And then a critical part of that strategic plan is a master facility plan that will align with that to look at and to engage in conversations over the next 12 to 15 months with our community about where do we want our elementary schools Where do we want our high schools? How big is the right size for a high school? All of that will happen as part of that strategic plan and that strategic vision. So again, 3 things here that I believe are critical, that by the end of June, we hope to be able to have those things together. We talked at Cabinet today about the student wellness versus the SEL and about bringing together, organizing all these tremendous resources that we have and sharing with our parents and getting our parents involved in that process. And we'll continue to plug our Be Well event, which is a parent event where in collaboration with the Worthington City School District on Saturday, April 30th, that we will be working together to provide moms and dads with resources and moms and dads with some in-service. It will very much look like a teacher in-service event for parents in the 2 communities to come together. I'm happy to answer any questions about these goals, entertain any suggestions, and that's the conclusion of my report. Okay, Mr. Melody. Oh,
The policies?
sorry. We had the first meeting of our new policy committee, and I didn't know if Mrs. De Silva or Mr. Valentine wanted to share anything about the policies that we have on here for first reading.
Sure, I can go. So yeah, we met on the 16th, I think. It was Dr. Marshausen, Mr. Valentine, Mr. Schwanke, Ms. Janet Grenison, and our legal counsel, Jessica Philemon. We reviewed 13 policies, which we have on the agenda for first reading tonight. Also, I'll mention we anticipate having administrators on the committee also, so that we have that, everyday input and insight. So I'm looking forward to that. One of the policies that I want to highlight is policy 0169.1, which is public participation. If you look on there, you'll see that there's some changes to Section B specifically, which allows any Dublin City Schools resident the opportunity to speak during public participation. That's a change that's added. And then Section C and D pertain to the registration process, and just outline that. And the deletions and additions under J outline what the presiding officer is able to do in order to maintain order within the meeting, but also be in alignment with First Amendment, First Amendment rights, I guess, is what I would say. A lot of these policies are being updated either due to statute requirements or just to make them more clear and concise. There's another one on there, policy 2271. It's in regards to college credit plus. And the 3rd paragraph is just a federal requirement for selective service. Policy 2370.01 is a blended learning policy that we're required to have. Policy 5772 is the weapons policy regarding students. And I'll just draw your attention to Section A, which was removed as it relates to law enforcement and not to students. And since this is a weapons policy in regards to students, that's removed. And then policy 6605 is entirely new, and it states that the district will not participate in crowdfunding as we are funded by taxpayer dollars. And then at our next policy committee meeting, we're looking at tech and social media policies with the plan to have readings in April and May. And you can add anything that I left out.
You were very thorough in the approach. I'd probably say, just from my time on committees, it was as good and thorough of a setup as I've experienced during my time. Thanks. Especially, we had all perspectives, and minus, at that point, the building level administrators, who obviously I think will bring a great deal of the day-to-day perspective when we start getting into some of these other items.
Yep.
Okay, thank you for the update on the policies. So now I will turn it over to Mr. Kern for the treasurer's comments.
Yes, just a few things on the agenda this evening. I went over those on the Friday update to the board, but just hit a few high points. We are closing one of our activity funds over at Davis, and the resulting transfer that you see goes along with it as closing out that fund, and the remaining funds that are in it going to some of the other activity funds, primarily Davis Middle School Student Council, and then the team funds at each grade level, 6th, 7th, and 8th. We do have approval of some appropriation changes. As we've mentioned several times, the issue of the remaining authority, $55.55 million from the 2018 bond issue. We have to be able to spend it. We need to legally appropriate that, so that's what are we doing this evening. We also have a bus purchase grant that allows us to help. It's not the whole amount, but it helps us in our annual bus purchases as part of our permanent improvement levy. Mr. Collier is here. We talked about Ohio Attorney General Safety Security Grant that we apply for and use for different things throughout the district. And then as you'll see, have you seen it throughout the year, we have our 500 funds, which are our federal level funds, which ODE periodically reallocates different amounts for various reasons throughout the state in different districts. And this is just to align with that allocation, in which there are additional allocations in those grants, even as small as $31.11. But to be able to spend it, we do have to appropriate it. So that's what we're doing. And finally, the restatement of the 457 plan, just really primarily 457 plan just for everyone's out here, and a 403B plan. They're similar to the 401K in the private sector that we offer our employees as a voluntary way to contribute to save for retirement. As part of that, there are two big changes that came down as part of, like I call it, a Christmas tree approach of legislation in the CARES Act. There is two requirements. That gives employees more and retirees more options in the sense that now at age 59 and a half, and if you're still employed at Dublin, you can take distribution, which before you had to have terminated service with the district. And lastly, they raised the required minimum distributions, which when you have to start taking money out at 70 and a half is now 72. So I think that's all good things and just more options for people. So that's really what that is about for this evening. Any questions?
All right, thank you. It was recommended by the treasurer that the Board of Education approve items 5B through 5G. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, please call the roll.
Mr. Valentine?
Sorry, I was taking a drink. Yes.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis?
Yes.
And Mr. Melody?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. The Deputy Superintendent comments.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Just three items for your consideration tonight. The first is a contract for Dr. Jess Shatkin, the owner of Born to be Wild, Why Teens Take Risks and How We Can Keep Them Safe. Dr. Marshausen referred to this speaker earlier this evening. This author will be coming to Columbus in partnership with New Albany City Schools and PERC, our Parents Encouraging Responsible Choices. And so the three of those came together to split the cost, and Dr. Shatkin will provide presentations for our staff, our community, and our administrators during his time here. The cost for that contract, for our portion of that contract, is $3,500. The second thing is in regards to our Leadership Academy. For many years, Mr. Anders and I were trying to remember how many. For many years, our teachers have sort of developed their own conference to kick off the school year. Leadership Academy is by teachers and for teachers and classified staff as well. It's a professional learning opportunity for our staff, completely voluntary, and this year it's scheduled on August 1st. and usually brings around 500 teachers who come on their own time to help one another learn and become inspired for the new school year. We always have an outside keynote speaker, though, to start it off, and this year we proposed Devin Siebold. Devin is a former teacher and coach and has various experiences in schools of, I believe, the New York area. And he will provide a lighthearted and captivating way to inspire our teachers to begin the 22-23 school year. And then the final item for your consideration is an amendment to the high school course and career planning handbook that you actually already approved. This is a small change. In the one you approved, health was listed as a course for grades 10 through 12, but to align with our past practice, we have it changed to 9th graders through 12th graders. Any questions?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, item 7D is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve items 7A through 7C. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions or comments? Okay, please call the roll.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis,
Yes.
Mr. Valentine,
Yes.
and Mr. Melody.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Okay, Chief Operating Officer's comments. Mr. Stark?
Good evening. I have a couple of items for approval tonight. The first one is approval of a resolution for a construction manager at risk for Kaufman High School. This is the building envelope project. The resolution is basically allowing us to authorize the district to proceed with contract negotiations with Robertson Construction, and it authorizes myself or the treasurer to enter into contract after we successfully negotiate the terms that you have before you. This project was publicly solicited through an RFQ and an RFP process, which is the code way of choosing this. And Robertson not only had they had the best overall value, lowest cost, and they've done projects like this once we checked out all their references. Second is an RFP. This is a request for proposal. This does not require public bidding, but we went out to multiple firms. We haven't had a maintenance agreement for HVAC in years. We've just used multiple different companies. So what we wanted to do to secure better pricing, response time, and really enhance the district's liability protection is we did a request for proposal. Spear Mechanical, who is familiar with the district, had the best overall value, best price, and not only best price, they had the best response time, and they're even willing to customize their hours to meet the hours of the school. So we are recommending a resolution to authorize the same type thing for us to go into contract negotiations with them based upon the terms that you have before you. Any questions?
Just one question. Why is Spear, it's significantly less? So just, kind of in your opinion, what?
It's that's a great question. It's the best thing about competitive bidding and when you do requests for proposals. Been on the other side of these. There's many times a company wants business, but they said, this business, for us to take it, we were going to march up our margins, because if we take it, we want to make money on this. Or when you look at our last public bid for HVAC, for example, for Old Sawmill, the swing was $900,000 between all the bidders. It really depends how our business fits with the business that chooses it. Spear was someone who really wanted our business. I think it fits well with them. There's other companies that would like our business, but it really doesn't fit with their model, so they're willing they need more margin to make it work. But that's why it's not only board policy, but it's personal belief that whenever you competitively bid, you really flush these things out. And it's quite surprising sometimes what you find, how much the marketplace swings. You'll see that more as we go through with public bidding, especially when we put a tabulation in front of you, how much the swing can be. And where you go on.
Jeff, if you could point out that we do have a relationship with Spear. It's not
we do,
that we don't
and I
trust.
will say that the top three bidders that we have a relationship with all three that came in there, so they're all very familiar with Dublin City Schools. Spear is probably the most familiar, but we've done work with Air Force One. Air Force One's actually won with bids before us with it, and I forgot the name of I think it was Limbaugh was the other one. They're familiar with us as well. We are a very, with 23 buildings, we require fast response times. When there's a heating and cooling issue, and some of those buildings, because of the age, are quite needy.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. All right, item 9C, it is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve items 9A, the resolution for construction manager at risk for Coppman High School, and 9B, resolution for HVAC RFP. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions or comments? Okay, please call the roll.
Mr. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis?
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
And Mr. Melody?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Okay, Executive Director, Human Resources.
Okay. Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Marchhausen, Mr. Kern. Let's start with the certified agenda. Starting out, there are 2 new job descriptions on for your review and approval. These positions live in our operations area, in Mr. Stark's area. The first is a coordinator of custodial services, and then the second is a coordinator of safety and security, and that's a position that Chuck Collier, who you may be familiar with, has been with the district for 2.5 years, but employed through the ESC. And so we're asking you to bring him over to Dublin City Schools as his role has grown, and he's a key member of the operations team. You'll also see there are 4 retirements and 2 resignations on the board agenda. For the retirements, we have Rhonda Lucci retiring with 34 years in Dublin from Carr Middle School, Margaret Dardinger, 23 years in Dublin from Scioto High School, Mary Ann Toon, 22 years from Indian Run, and then Karen O'Brien, 21 years from Thomas Elementary. There are 2 summer school coordinator approvals on. One is for elementary, the other is for high school tonight. You'll also see 2 athletic event workers and a salary change for a substitute school nurse. And like always, there are several contracts on that are for academics and sports. Most of them are for spring sports, but a few are on to close out a prior season. Moving on to the classified agenda, there are 2 resignations on the agenda tonight. We are hiring 5 new employees in the classified area, and then we have 2 salary changes as well. The final area in HR is there are 3 stipends. One of these is a revision to a previously approved stipend for the Dublin Lit Conference, and then the other 2 are stipends for the Washington, D.C. trip from Sells Middle School and Grizel Middle School. And that concludes the HR portion. Any questions at all?
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
All right, item 11D, it is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve items 11A, personnel action items certified, 11B, personal action items classified, and 11C, stipend requests. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, please call the roll.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mr. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis?
Yes.
And Mr. Melody?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Future agenda items, any topics the board would like addressed? Okay. All right, executive session. In accordance with Ohio Revised Code 121.22G, the Board of Education will go into executive session to consider 1, the discipline of a public employee or official or the investigation of charges or complaints against a public employee. 2, to consider the purchase of property for public purposes or the sale of property at a competitive bidding. And 3, to consider disputes involving a public body that are subject to pending or imminent court action. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, please call the roll.
Mrs. Gillis?
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mr. Valentine?
Yes.
And Mr. Melody?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. And upon the end of executive session, there will be no voting, and we will just adjourn the meeting.
I would like to invite Mrs. Schwanke, Mr. Boney, and Mr. Stark to executive session as well, without objection.
All right, thank you.